Today, the Below Average Joe's MMA show present the weekend recap. And we're here to talk about anything and everything from UFC Vegas insert number here. Sean Strickland goes back-to-back on main events. Gets the win this time over Nassourdine Imavov. But Dominic, the real story of Saturday was everything going on outside the octagon. Lots of big fight announcements coming like claymores on a battlefield. You're just dodging, trying not to let them take you out. So we'll talk about all this and more, and it all starts right now. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us, episode 260. It's Monday. We're here to give you guys your recap of the weekend of MMA, which only belonged to the UFC, Dom. UFC Vegas insert number here. Headlined by Sean Strickland versus Nassourdine Imavov. But we know what the real story is today. Big fight announcements for really our 2 March pay-per-views. That's right, March is going to be one of the biggest months in recent MMA history. Dominic, how excited are you? How does it feel to have MMA back in your life? Just let me know what you're feeling.
Listen, it was fun to have a card this weekend to watch. It wasn't anything crazy, nothing great, but it was just nice to have fights back in our lives. But then you get all these announcements that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. That's what makes it fun to be an MMA fan, man. These are going to be big ones to talk about, big storylines in the backgrounds of these fights as well that we get to get into. Whew, it feels good to be back into the swing of things. Our favorite sport is getting cracking, Noah, and it's fantastic. And there's nobody better to discuss it all with than you, my friend. So how was your weekend? We're heading in. Your boys, the Bengals, playing tonight when we're recording this Sunday night. How are you feeling heading into it?
The nerves are hitting a little bit. We do have a big game tonight. Who Dey Nation, stand up. But can't think about that right now. Gotta process and think about what's going on in our MMA space. And it's been a good weekend. Fights, take them, leave them. But you know, it's good to have them back. It's kind of the calm before the storm that is UFC 283, right? Coming next Saturday. So that'll be fun. And, obviously getting these big bombs dropped on us that are these huge fights really help in fleshing out this episode. So can't be upset about that. And, Dominic, I think we're just going to go ahead and jump right in to our main event of Saturday. Sean Strickland gets the victory over Nassourdine Imavov via unanimous decision. That is back-to-back main events for Sean Strickland. He took this one on about a week's notice. Came in, weighed about 205 pounds. Imavov, about 195. So there was about a 10-pound discrepancy. But he does get the win. I guess, Dom, there's not a ton of takeaways for this fight, I guess. But if you had to name, like, your one big takeaway from this fight, what is it?
I think it's the fact that Sean Strickland can come in off the couch and still go for 25 minutes like he's been in a training camp for 8 weeks. Like, we again, take it or leave it how you like his fight style, dislike it, whatever. Depends on the fight, I guess, with some people. You know what he's going to do every time, and it does amount to a lot of output, nonstop pressure for as long as the fight shall go. In this case, 25 minutes. And he did it after going 25 minutes in a hellacious fight with Jared Cannonier less than a month ago. Takes this on 5 days' notice. And then, I mean, honestly, shut down Imavov for the whole fight for the most part. That was just the biggest takeaway for me, regardless of the size, the weight, like everything. The fact that he can do that, man, with no camp or anything, that's impressive. I mean, like the guy, dislike the guy. I think that's the biggest storyline in this whole fight, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that that definitely feels like the big takeaway is that we have to give a lot of credit to Sean Strickland. Imavov deserves credit too for taking this fight, but I'm not trying to look too much into the performance here from Imavov because he is taking on a new opponent as well on 5 days' notice, and he was outweighed by 10 pounds, so it's kind of hard to really judge this performance from Imavov too much. It may have been too much too soon. Time will tell. But for now, just appreciate him stepping up and taking the fight. His first main event spot didn't go his way, but I don't think he loses any stock here. Sean Strickland, I think, does come out looking pretty good from this. I have my, I guess, no, I was going to say I have my critiques with his fight style, but I really don't. I mean, I recognize it is what it is. I think people, because of his brash, aggressive talking style, I think people just assume that he gets into the cage and just throws down. But he's actually a much more intelligent fighter than what that kind of style might bring him results-wise. And he picks his shots very well. Great striking. He will get into a very technical brawl with people and usually comes out on top. And that's sort of what happened here. He looked really good. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of on to the next one for Strickland. Not a whole lot else to say. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Dom?
I want to add one thing. It was actually something that Dean Thomas said on the broadcast, which was, I've never really thought about it until he said it. But he said that Sean Strickland can make better fighters, hence saying that Imavov overall is just the better mixed martial artist, right? That's basically what he was saying. But he can turn these better fighters into, or bring them down to his level, force them to fight his fight. And a majority of the time when Strickland does that, he gets the win or has very close losses like we saw in the Cannonier fight. So I just thought that was an interesting point. I've never thought about it before, but now I feel like I'm not going to be able to unsee it every time that Sean Strickland gets in the cage afterward.
Yeah, well said. We'll move on to our fight announcements portion of the show. Big ones, Dom. Big ones, and they were leaked ahead of time. I feel sorry for a poor T-Mobile Arena employee who put up this graphic on the arena before it was ready to be announced, but it is official. UFC 285, March 4th, there will be a new heavyweight champion crowned as Ciryl Gane takes on Jon Jones. The fight that Dominic has been clamoring for forever at this point. He gets it. It is a massive fight, but there is so much to dig into here, Dom. Yes. You obviously have the element that this is for the undisputed heavyweight title. Francis Ngannou is now stripped of the title. He is also free to sign wherever he wants in the UFC. They have essentially cut ties with Ngannou. Just a lot of craziness, Dom. I'm curious, your thoughts. We'll start with just the matchup itself. This being the headliner, March 4th. No co-main announced yet, but just, maybe explain to the people why this has been the fight that you have been most wanting to see for a long time.
Yeah, this is to me the highest level fight that the UFC can make right now, in my opinion. Like, obviously we have Islam versus Volt coming up in February, and that's outstanding, right? Champion versus champion. So if there's anything that's close to it, it would be that one. But man, Ciryl Gane just looks like one of the most special talents that the heavyweight division for sure has ever seen, and honestly the UFC as a whole. The way that he can move at that weight, and Dana kind of said it last night, he's a heavyweight that moves like a middleweight, and it's just ultra impressive. Jon Jones is looked at by a lot of people as the best fighter of all time, and if he's not your best, he's probably in your top 3, top 5 at worst. So the fact that they get to match up together, Jon Jones finally making his debut at the heavyweight division. I believe, Noah, he first mentioned wanting to do this in 2013. So 10 years later, we are going to get to see that debut, and it comes against a special talent like Gane. I don't think it gets much better than this. Like, obviously, if Francis was still the champion, and we'll get into that a little bit more, him versus Jon is a great fight. Don't get me wrong. But if we're talking all around skill sets, tit for tat, matchup styles, everything, this is what you want. If you love the sport of MMA, I couldn't be more excited for this fight getting announced, Noah.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent test for Jon Jones at heavyweight because we know what kind of challenge Ciryl Gane will bring in terms of striking. And then if all else fails, Jon Jones maybe goes into for his wrestling and is able to utilize that. So we'll get to see really just how good a 35-year-old Jon Jones making his debut at heavyweight after being off for what will be 3 years at this time. It's completely unpredictable what kind of fighter we're going to get in there. So much has happened since then, both good and bad for his career. And you have the layoff mixed in with the age, mixed in with the new division. He looks good. He looks big. He looks like he's filled out at heavyweight. He took the proper time to get his body ready for a new division, put on the pounds the right way. Now it's just time to see what kind of fighter he actually is at heavyweight. And against a guy like Ciryl Gane, if he could go in there and beat Ciryl Gane, that would just show so much in terms of the all-time status and just how the legacy of Jon Jones, for whatever it's worth. I understand that so much of what's happened with him outside of the octagon sort of is like the black cloud over his legacy. But you can't deny in terms of his athletic achievements, this would be up there for his legacy as a fighter if he were to come out on top in this fight. I'd be curious what the opening odds are for this. I think is Jones a slight favorite or is he a slight underdog? Because I almost feel like he should be an underdog in this fight.
That's actually a really good question. I have not seen or heard, but I can try and check.
Well, while you do, I think we'll address the Francis Ngannou portion of this announcement. And, for me personally, I know Dom said this is the fight he's most been looking forward to. For me personally, I am disappointed that they couldn't get a deal done with Ngannou. I think everybody is. But I think one of the reasons, I guess, for that is because I thought a fight between Ngannou and Jon Jones was just massive. Don't get me wrong, a fight with him and Ciryl Gane is great. It's big. But I thought a fight between Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou was even bigger. I thought it was an even bigger test for Jon. You take on the guy who beat Ciryl Gane just a year ago and has the biggest KO punching power the division's ever seen, and he looks like he's making his game even more well-rounded. Taking on Jon Jones, who would have been much smaller than him, but obviously has such a great skill set in his own right. But then you still take in the factors of 35 years old, 3-year layoff, all that. So I think I was more interested in a Jon Jones and Ngannou fight. But once this fight was announced with him and Gane, it's huge. It's massive. It's a big fight. It's a big deal. I'm excited for it. So really that's like splitting hairs. But the bigger part of this, Dom, is that Francis Ngannou is a free agent now. Francis Ngannou is stripped of the title. He is now free to sign wherever he wants. They have waived any sort of matching clause or anything from his contract that would keep him in the UFC. He is no strings attached, an unrestricted free agent at this moment. And I can't help, Dom, but feel like, when we saw that picture come out that I believe Ngannou had posted, and you saw one of his family members wearing that PFL shirt, and people were like, does this really mean anything? And at the time, it was kind of, I think I even kind of subscribed to the belief of, it's probably just a negotiating tactic, like not really something he's actually, thinking about doing. It just seemed implausible that this guy, who was like the best heavyweight in the world and could get the biggest money in the UFC, you would think that he would go to the PFL, who is a smaller promotion. But the more you really think about it, PFL just signed Jake Paul to their pay-per-view super fight division. They obviously are willing to shell out some money to really try to take this PFL thing to the next level. And they are serious about this pay-per-view super fight division. I'm not super confident in it, but they are proving that they are really trying to get behind it and put resources into it. So Dominic, I think in the next couple weeks, Francis Ngannou will be signed to the PFL Super Fight pay-per-view division. That's always a mouthful to say. What were your thoughts be on that? Do you think that would be a good career move for Francis Ngannou, or do you feel like do you feel like there'd be, I don't know, like would you really be able to sort of, I guess as a fan, because I don't expect you to like critique his career move and say like, well, it's a bad career move when he's ultimately the one thinking it's best for him. Like I'm not trying to put you in a position where what's best for him. But in terms of his legacy as a fighter, in terms of where he stands in his career right now, do you feel like as a fan this is a good career move for him?
I think now that the UFC is basically out of the picture, it's the best possible career move for him, to be honest. I feel like Francis got to a point where he was fighting. I mean, he was a very active heavyweight for a long time. Don't look at this past year as like any outlaw, like it's an outlier, right? Because he was always fighting a lot. He was fighting very, very good fighters and beating a majority of them. So he kind of reached the pinnacle of the UFC. He was the champion. He was able to, have those big moments. And with the injury and everything, I feel like it put a lot of clarity into his head, like what is really going to make the most sense for me moving forward. I've kind of done it all here. So financially, he's looking to get set up the best that he can. And if that is in the PFL, that is 100% what he should do. And I think it's 100% what he is going to do. It is funny to look back on that picture that you mentioned. At the time, we never even really got to talk about it on here because it came during that kind of lull period. I was kind of in the same boat as you. Like, I mean, she's not wearing it for no reason, but maybe it's just like Noah said, a negotiating tactic, wanting to kind of leverage the UFC. But now I feel like you have to look into that even more so. I feel like he's probably maybe even already had a couple discussions, or at least his management team with the PFL. I think things are now going to move relatively quickly. He will be in the PFL for a chance to get his opportunity to box, like he's been talking about and wanting to do for massive money, to be in the super fight pay-per-view division with the 50-50 revenue share. Do with that what you will with how the buys will be, but still it'll be a lot of money. And I think there's an opportunity for him to compete in the season format as well and add another $1 million on top should he win the whole thing. Massive, massive financial opportunities are here for Francis, and I think he is absolutely going to capitalize on them, Noah. It's like 95% to me that that's where he's going, the PFL.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. But I guess my actual question, though, was that I understand the UFC have now cut ties, but let's say the UFC was still interested. If he could go back, if he would have signed back, been the UFC Heavyweight Champion, and you have a fight with Jon Jones or Ciryl Gane or Stipe that you could potentially have next, versus what he would get with the PFL, the potential money-making opportunities. My question is that the right career move for him? Because it's not that the UFC didn't want him back. He's choosing to bank on himself, to bet on himself and go elsewhere because I'm assuming, didn't feel like the UFC's offer was enough for his liking. Even though Dana said it was the biggest contract that a heavyweight would have ever gotten in the UFC's history. He felt like he was worth more, so he is going to find more. Do you feel like it's the right move, though? That's the question. Like, do you think him leaving the UFC to go to what is a smaller promotion, but potentially to make more money, have maybe more freedom, more avenues to make money, and then everything else you just said, is that the right move for that in your belief as a fan, without knowing his current situation? Do you think it's the right move?
I think it is. I really do think it is. Going back to kind of what I said with how he, in his head, I feel like he probably just figured he's done it all in the UFC. Why not gamble on myself, as Noah said? Selfishly, of course, I'd love to see him fight, Jon Jones, have a rematch with Gane, a trilogy with Stipe or something like that, whatever. I do find myself saying yes, that I think it is the right career move for him. I think it's just going to set up a lot of cool things that we may get to witness him do that we wouldn't have necessarily got the chance to see inside the UFC. I feel like 2 years ago, if you asked Dom this question, I would have said no. and went on a tangent about how he needs to fight the best, blah, 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 build the legacy. But I don't know, man. I feel like his legacy's kind of there. Like one of the hardest hitter ever in the UFC, became a champion, been there, done that. Now he's wanting to experiment, take chances, do some cool shit in this time period where it feels like the PFL is really at the forefront of that for the MMA world and MMA space. I like it. I really do think it's the right decision.
I think time will tell. I see what you're saying. I think a lot of those money making avenues could be great, but he is sort of going into something that's not a given right now. Like the PFL is yet to really prove that they can consistently do a pay-per-view super fight division, that they can continue to charge people for pay-per-views, put on fights on pay-per-views that people are willing to buy, so that it is worth getting guys like this or Jake Paul who can make a 50-50 revenue split. 50-50 revenue split don't mean a lot if 50,000 people are buying the card.
Right.
You know, you want more than that. So he's definitely betting on himself here, which I fully support and think that more people should do that. I think time will tell if this is really the right move, but I do think he's taking a lot of risk here because, Dom, I could totally see, I mean, the PFL tends to do a better job in marketing their fighters or promoting their fighters and fights than like Bellator does. But there's a good chance in like 2 years, Ngannou's going to be kind of irrelevant. Like he would still be, even if he's heavily promoted or whatever, like as big of a star as this guy was bubbling to be in the UFC and had really become. I could see in a couple years, you know, if this PFL super fight division doesn't really hit the ground running, what boxing opportunity is there going to be? He's no longer the UFC heavyweight champion. Like it or not, a lot of these opportunities that were at his disposal with the whole boxing Tyson Fury or whatever, a lot of that came because he was the UFC heavyweight champion. What's ironic about that is he can't get those opportunities while being the UFC heavyweight champion. But a lot of the reason why people were interested in him for those opportunities were because he was the UFC heavyweight champion. So it's like you have to leave that organization to get to that opportunity. But then once you leave it, all of a sudden the thing that was kind of getting you there is no longer attached to you. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the audience, I guess, perceives this move. How long term, in 5 years, is Francis Ngannou going to be a star? Is he going to be one of the biggest names in the sport? Will he be a bigger version of Fedor in terms of MMA fans? Or will he become sort of irrelevant? I think either one's on the table, but I don't blame him for taking the chance.
Yeah.
Next one here, Dom, we will talk about UFC 286. Got our headliner, our co-headliner. UFC welterweight title will be defended. It will be the third matchup between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. Co-main event, Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. This is happening March 18th in London, England. So Leon Edwards gets his homecoming fight versus Kamaru. Then you got Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. So I guess your thoughts, third matchup, but probably more importantly, at least because we kind of already knew we were kind of getting this fight, what do you think about Justin Gaethje, Rafael Fiziev, Dom?
That's a fantastic co-main event. I'm honestly a little shocked that it's on that one and not the Vegas one, though, being that neither guy really has nothing to do with London. But, you know, it's still a sick fight regardless. I don't care where it happens. It could happen in the, well, no, I almost said the Apex, but no, that fight has to happen in front of people. It's awesome. I think it's an incredible co-main event. It's an incredible matchup. Justin Gaethje fighting someone, I mean, obviously it's still a top 10 guy, but it's someone that he's been fighting big names and guys that are veterans and whatnot, but now we finally maybe know we're going to see this could kickstart a trend of where these guys that have been in the top of this division for a while are welcoming this newer generation into that top five, or at least giving them the opportunity to get into that top five. So I think it's an incredible fight. It's by no means going to be a boring fight. It's almost guaranteed to be a banger. Fiziev is an incredible kickboxer. Justin Gaethje is just a dog. And I feel like, and I'm going to try and describe this as good as I can because our buddy and I, Branson, was talking about this with him the other night. Gaethje is a perfect matchup for these young up and comers to get a chance to get into the top five because it's winnable in a sense that Gaethje's kill or be killed, right? You're always going to have a chance to get that finish, but it's never going to come easy because he is always pressing forward. He's always forcing his opponents to fight his type of fight, regardless of if he wins or loses. And that's why I think this is such a perfect opportunity for Fiziev and for Gaethje to potentially hold on to his spot there. This is going to be his 11th UFC fight, all 11 coming against top 10 competition. That is an absolute insane stat. So it's an amazing co-main event. I wish it was honestly even 5 rounds, but 3 rounds should suffice when there's going to be that much violence. And then you get the trilogy with Kamaru and Leon. That's a hell of a twosome there on the top of that card. I don't even really know many other fights on that card. I'd have to go back and look through them, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, they're definitely stacking that card. I can't remember off the top of my head what else is on there either, but I know it's pretty good stuff. So the month of March is just looking like it's going to be an all-timer for this podcast and for just our MMA fandom as a whole. So, Dominic, with that, we'll move into the rest of UFC Vegas insert number here. Co-main event. Dan Ige gets back on track. He gets the second round knockout of Damon Jackson. Poor Damon Jackson might have tore both his ACLs in the process, but it's a big win for Ige. He was in need of a big win. He got it. Tough loss for Damon Jackson, but it sort of happened the way we thought it would. How much does this win do for Ige? You know, does this really... Is his next matchup now going to be against a guy ahead of him in the rankings, or does he still have to kind of prove himself for a little bit longer?
I think for his morale, he just needed a win, man. He had lost 3 in a row, and if you go even past that, like 5 out of 6 or something, like it was a tough skid that he's been on. And I think we do kind of know the ceiling that Ige's at now, so I'm not calling for him to get cracking right back into like a contender spot or get back into the top 5. But I think he does fight another ranked opponent, someone in that 10 to 15 range. I think there are still good fights to be had for Ige. And if he wins that one, maybe we talk about him cracking back into the top 10. It sucks for Damon Jackson. He was on a really good streak of momentum. His chance to get in to the top 15, and he falls short here. I just don't know, hindsight, and again, we don't train or anything like that, but we watch a hell of a lot of MMA, and it's just, I wonder why he chose to stand with Ige, because he's so good on the ground, and he never really even gave it a chance to try it. And Ige's good, he's well-rounded, so I'm not saying a takedown would have just came easy, but I am just a bit surprised, especially even after like you get done with that first round or even the first few minutes, that you don't at least try and press it and see what could happen. But that's all hindsight now that the fight is over. In the moment, I know how hard it is for these guys. So I do still like Damon Jackson. I think he's in fun fights. It's just it was a bit of a step up, I guess, too soon. But Dan Ige's got that power, man. He can do that to anybody.
Next fight, Dom. Raquel Pennington continues her resurgence by getting a big split decision victory over Ketlen Vieira. This fight wasn't all that great.
Yeah, this women's bantamweight division is just on the struggle bus the past, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, it's been rough for this division, man. And you're totally right. You're totally right in the sense that this should have been, or at least felt, way more important. Number 2 versus number 5, win streaks on the line, a title shot potentially on the line, and I don't know, man. It's just I don't know what it is with this division and all the top talent right now. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's awesome that Rocky's won 5 fights in a row now and had this resurgence. I think it's incredible. but I just don't know with the storylines of Juliana and Amanda how anyone has really taken that number one contender spot away from her. I think you have to run that fight back and do it a third time, and we'll just kind of see what happens with the rest. At least, please, hopefully, if they run that trilogy back, there's some sort of parity afterward for a number one contender, man. But yeah, I think after seeing this fight, do the trilogy. Rocky still got the win streak. And they're also, congratulations to her. They're having a baby, her and Tisha Torres. So she'll probably want to take some time away anyway. So maybe it's for the best that they do that trilogy. And then we'll see what happens. So I like that, Noah.
He knocks out Raoni Barcelos 4 minutes 40 seconds of round number 1. I did not see this coming. I know Barcelos, as good as he's been, as underrated as he's been, hasn't been as good over the last year or so, maybe showing a bit of a drop-off. So I figured Nurmagomedov would win in dominating fashion, but this doesn't happen to Raoni Barcelos. He does not get knocked out cold like this in the first round. What a performance for Umar Nurmagomedov. What should be next is a guy with a name, and he may get Umar may get a top 5 opponent next. As crazy as that sounds, a guy who has not fought anyone in the top 15 and his first matchup be a top 5 guy, I really believe it's a possibility. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Noah, let's look at it this way. The guy's already number 11, having not had to do that, in terms of fighting rank competition. Then you brutally destroy and knock out Raoni Barcelos. That says something, man. He is probably going to crack. He may crack into the top 10 on Tuesday with no ranked wins, and I would have no problem with it. No issues here. And I think he honestly should fight a top 5 guy next, if I'm being truthful with you. That's how scary this guy is. That's how good this guy is. When you're known for your grappling advantages and combat style, sambo, wrestling, and you go out and do this, come on, man. As I yank my fucking ears out with my earbuds, it's scary. It is absolutely scary. This is a future champion that we're looking at here. He's 20, just turned 26 or 27. Top 5. I don't care what his wins look like right now. He's an absolute beast.
Yep. And that's it for the rest, Dom. But there's only one way we end the show around here, and that's with the little segment we like to call closing statements.
I'm going to go back to the MMA related portion. We don't do that a ton on the closing statements, but just to get back into the Francis thing just a little bit here to finish the episode, what do you all think? Do you think this is the right choice for Francis? Do you think he will go to the PFL and be in the Superfight division? Will he box next before anything? Just give us your kind of thoughts on the whole Francis situation, what you think will happen next in his career. And just for fun, early predictions on Jon Jones, Ciryl Gane. Forgot to mention it earlier, but I did look up the odds quickly. It is Jon Jones plus 100, Ciryl Gane minus 120, Noah. So let us know all your thoughts on that craziness that we saw yesterday.
Jon Jones as an underdog. That's just crazy, but I get it. I mean, I really do. I mean, everything going against him going into this fight is incredible. And Ciryl Gane is just so good that I believe it. But it's just crazy that Jon Jones is an underdog. That's wild. Yeah, I got nothing, Dom, so I guess that's it. My name's Noah Baker. That's Dominic Slee. We are but just two of the below average Joes, and we'll see you guys on Friday.